Good to have you here. Good to have you here as we discuss the explosion of COVID cases, but what should really happen. The CDC says Michigan should be shut back down, but as I've pointed out quite clearly, the lockdowns didn't mitigate the spread of the virus. Masks, which have been mandated since July 13th and have about an 85 to 90% usage among Michigan residents, has not slowed the spread of the virus. In fact, Michigan is dead last, worst performing state now. Is that because of science? I'm confused. Wendy Block is the Vice President of Business Advocacy, member engagement for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce as well. Wendy, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Now, in response to all of this, the governor not moving forward to shut the state down, even though that's what the CDC says should happen, though I dispute whether that's the right approach. But she is shutting offices down for another 6 months, apparently. If you can work from home, I guess. What do you make of this?
Yeah, we're just really frustrated and disappointed. We thought that Michigan was moving towards lifting its ban on in-person work. An order that's been in place since October was set to expire on April 14. But the governor announced yesterday that it is her intention to reissue that order for another 6 months. And so that means that our businesses can't have offices, can't have workers in the offices. And really the impact here is on not only those businesses who can't have their office workers in, but also on our cities and downtowns who really are just struggling through this pandemic in terms of foot traffic and getting people into their establishments. So there's really this trickle-down effect going on with our economy and just a lot of frustration.
So what do you think? I think there's a lot of confusion because we're told, lockdown, it'll help flatten the curve. There's no proof of that. Wear the masks. It'll stop the spread of the virus. Don't see that either. In fact, just this past week, 2 people I know that have been extremely adherent to the rules, to the recommendations, got the virus. These are 2 people that have not let up their guard. They've continued, and they caught the virus. So it just makes me wonder, is there really something we can do to control the virus, or do we go back to work and try to live with it because we live in a world that's full of infectious disease? I don't know the answer, Wendy.
Yeah, and I think you raised some good points, Steve. In our minds, this office ban, this ban on in-person work really doesn't make a lot of sense. We know that office settings are some of our lowest risk settings that are out there. People have, high cubicles. They have offices that they go into. Maybe they shut the door. So it really doesn't make sense to say to all employers, regardless of your circumstances, regardless of how your office is set up, that you must make them work from home if their work can be completed remotely. And, we really just think it's time to get government's thumb off of these decisions, to get rid of these one-size-fits-all mandates. No other state in the nation has a restriction on in-person work like Michigan does. And, it doesn't seem to be really, as you mentioned, to be moving the numbers or changing anything. And, it is, though, putting a damper on our economic recovery. It is impacting employees who feel isolated and may even be depressed in many situations because they're waking up and doing the same thing every day. And there's just not the same level of collaboration and innovation going on. And this is impacting our cities and our downtowns, like our restaurants and our retailers. And so we feel it's time to get Michiganders back to work and to start talking about how we're going to start easing some of these restrictions. Some may need to be with us for a longer time. But certainly, we shouldn't be saying, government shouldn't be saying, yes, no, you can't go to work. Yes, you can. We think these decisions are best left in the workplace.
Well, I go back to what I was seeing a year ago about this time before the big lockdowns began. And that was, as you aptly pointed out, Wendy, companies, businesses were being proactive already. They were cleaning their workspaces more, making sure that things were tidier, more disinfectant, whatever it may have been. But they were actively doing that. Were the businesses. They didn't have to be told to do that. They knew what to do, right? They knew how to handle it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And, even if the governor were to lift this ban on in-person work tomorrow, that doesn't mean every worker out there will be returning to the office, by the end of the week. Many employers have already told their employees they're going to stay home for several more months. And that's an appropriate decision probably for those workplaces. But in many situations, employers and employees are eager to get back in the office. And we think it's time for employers and employees to have those conversations to make the decisions that work best for them. But right now, these rules don't give employers or employees a whole lot of flexibility on the question. They are an outright prohibition on in-person work unless that work can somehow not be feasibly completed at home. And so, even for the employee who wants to come in, it's really difficult for the employer to say yes because of the strict nature of those rules. So, again, we just feel like these decisions are really best left in the workplace. Employers have the safety protocols ready to go. They know what they need to do to keep employees safe at this point, and we think it's time to trust them and to allow them to begin bringing workers back.
Yeah, the other thing that concerns me is, how far will the assault on some businesses go? We've seen restaurant owners jailed. We've seen barbers fined thousands of dollars for doing what? Their job. No proof or evidence that they had anything to do with anyone getting COVID ever, whether it's Carl Mankey over in Owasso or the restaurant owner over in Holland. And yet they're being targeted. I see in California now a restaurant has calling it the tyranny on the common man after the state put a fence around the restaurant because they had broken virus protocols or whatever. So they put a chain link fence around the place. The government did. I mean, how far are we? I mean, I haven't seen that here, but how far are we willing to allow this to go?
Yeah, good question. I think the concern here is, MIOSHA is issuing citations. When you get a citation, you get put on a state website with your company name and with the accusations. They issue press releases. And, so even worse than the monetary fine that comes with this is some of the, public shaming, public relations campaigns against these companies. And, again, getting back to this rule, MIOSHA tries to say, well, it doesn't really prohibit in-person work. Yes, their rule has the word prohibiting in it. But really we mean this, and we've been arguing with them, just kind of to say what you mean. If you don't mean to prohibit it, then you should say what you mean, because employers look at that language and the rule and they see prohibiting and they say, okay, they want me to prohibit in-person work. And if I don't, I
You're
might
going to get penalized.
From MIOSHA and
Right.
a fine and be on a website and be in a press release and all these sorts of things, and then you're off to the races. And, employers are in the business of complying with laws and rules and regulations, and some of these things have just gotten so confusing and so gray where, you're supposed to be mind readers in many cases to try and figure out, well, the words on the page say this, but what do they really mean?